Welcome to the Obsessed with Plants podcast. I'm David. I'm obsessed with plants with my co-host here.
I'm Chris, and I'm the bushman for the day.
Bushman.
I'm the bushman for the day. When I first moved to Florida, my neighbor Wayne, in his phone, he had me called Chris the Bushman because he didn't know my last name, and he was like, he's always in the bushes. He's always like messing with some animal or with some plants or whatever. And so I was always called Chris the Bushman when I first moved to Claremont. So today we're talking about those crazy crawlies, creepers and crawlies.
Critters.
So how do we deal with pests and wildlife, and what are some of the ones that you want to cover today, like just some of the pests in general that
I feel like people have problems with all sorts of things, whether it's insects, whether it's animals. So I think we should just cover
neighbor kids, sisters.
I don't have those in my notes, but yeah, we could talk about pesky family and friends
husbands that mow things over.
Exactly.
Actually, I have a friend that lives probably 20, 30 minutes from here, and she's probably going to listen to this. And she,
you know who you are.
Once in a while, she'll send me these pictures of like, well, he mowed this over again. What do I do? Well, you pray, or we use it as grafting material,
Dude.
But she's always really good. She goes, well, technically it's kind of my fault because I didn't have the flag, next to it or, whatever.
Sometimes that doesn't matter. My mother
Sometimes
pulled up
it
a
doesn't.
baby starfruit. Ironically enough, it was the only thing in the garden with a tag on it.
What are the chances? So talking about pests and wildlife, and how do we kind of control that? And I think for most of my clients and my food forest friends, that's probably the question or the group of questions that I get the most in the first 2 years.
Yeah.
Is like, this is eating my plants, or what is this bug, or what is this, animal, or this footprint or hoof print or whatever. And I think that's a really good problem to have because it shows that they care. The steward, the client cares about their system. They care about their investment, and they care about the hard work that went into it or the design. So it does show that they care. But I think pest management we were talking about this earlier, it's a little bit like having a kid, and that your firstborn child, a lot of families are like, oh, I got to hold it this way and give it the food at exactly this time. The second kid, you're kind of like, their legs are kind of dangling out. Your third kid, you're like throwing them up in the air and they're running wild, and food forest is kind of like year 1, year 2, year 3 is that we kind of go, okay, I don't have to hover, quite as much.
Well, and just like children, sometimes you see something and just because you've never experienced it before, it looks like a problem, but it may not actually be that big of an issue or an issue at all. It can be scary though, because you suddenly see, oh, there's this new bump, there's this new bug, there's this new, and of course, if it's eating something in the garden and it's like, well, that's supposed to be for me.
Yep.
Like, why? That can be nerve-wracking and
it's so true.
Challenging.
I had somebody last month that sent me this picture of this caterpillar that looked like it was on a citrus tree. That looked like bird poop. And they were like, oh, I thought it was bird poop. And I went to flick it off and it moved. And I was like, oh, it's a giant swallowtail caterpillar. And she's like, but it's eating all the leaves. And I was like, well, you got to choose. Do you want those couple leaves, or do you want the giant swallowtail butterfly? And she was like, oh, I definitely want the butterflies. Same thing with like Gulf fritillary butterflies on passion vine. I'm like, let it eat my plant all the way down. Like the problem is not that big of a deal. The plant's going to come back and I get all those, butterflies in the process, but I think a lot of this in food forestry starts for good reason because we're taking a blank canvas, a yard, and we're totally changing the ecosystem. Like we're going from a grass monoculture to a polyculture with fruit and nuts and berries and vegetables. And
in some cases, if you're like in a new HOA or a new neighborhood that's just been developed, that entire area has been essentially sterilized from ecological standpoint.
Yep.
And, just like with our immune systems, if you were to completely sterilize us, that leaves us open to everything. Now, that doesn't mean they're all bad things that are going to enter our bodies. But when you have nothing there, everything's going to suddenly flock in and try to take up space.
Yep.
So,
and sometimes it can kind of cause some unrest in the system. It's like somebody that's never taken probiotics before.
Yep.
Probiotics are so good for you. And, they take a dose or two and then they go, oh, I feel weird, and it causes a little bit of upset until the body comes back into homeostasis. And our yards are the same way. When we introduce mulberries and all of these things, the birds are going, whoa, this is cool. As much as I'm saying, whoa, this is cool. Like the butterflies and the caterpillars and the insects and all of nature is going, this is new. I
Mhm.
like this. And they all want to come visit. It just happens to be that they want to eat while they come over.
And just like when your neighbors see a beautiful fruit tree with tons of fruit and they're like, oh, that's so amazing. Nobody around me has that. The birds are thinking the exact same thing.
Oh yeah. Yep. And it's okay to share. We're going to share the space. Like my ecosystem, any of our ecosystems are not under a biodome force field. We
They
are
shouldn't
meant
be.
to be connected. We're meant to be a part of a living, moving, and breathing ecosystem. So I think it's important to recognize that we're not managing, meaning eliminating the pest. We're living in the same system with them. And how do we stay in balance in a way that's good for both of us, that they have their place, I have my place. It's called boundaries, people, and giving ants a place in the system, giving deer or, predatory birds, they get a place in the system because they give a gift. However, your gift cannot be in my chicken coop. It needs to be given in another place and in another context.
Well, and I mean, every animal is going to eat more than one thing. And so if you have something where they only have one option to consume, they're going to go for that one option because frankly, they're hungry just like we do.
Do you
And
find they normally go for the strongest option or the weaker options first?
see, I usually think that they go for the weaker option.
Yeah, I think so
Occasionally,
too.
you'll have something they'll go for the best, But just like your body, if you are healthy and strong, your immune system is going to be able to be fighting off any sort of pests and diseases.
Yeah.
Plants are the same way. They have a strong immune system, and their body will naturally push away
Push it away.
small pests and stuff that's not going to stop, a large animal from, eating the
Right.
plant. But for smaller things that are just going to be picking at it, like diseases and bugs, they generally always focus on the weaker stuff because that's easier for them to eat.
Yeah. And unfortunately, you brought up a good point is like, because they're going after the weaker stuff, we also have to ask ourselves, what are the weaker things? Almost always it's annual vegetables because annual vegetables are not native to the United States. They're native to Europe, the Mediterranean, to Central and South America, like very few annual vegetables that we consume. A few beans or peas, maybe, but not really. They're mostly succession of species that are the transitional, ones.
Yeah, and that's an important thing to kind of just learn the history of plants a little bit, as we're so used to just having fields of things, and that's just how we've been growing things for centuries. But a lot of times those were old forests, those were old ecosystems that were cleared or had been cleared, and then we grew stuff on them. Well, that's perfect for vegetables because they want that fallen forest, they want that transition of a storm or a fire has come through, and it provides them an opportunity. But the problem is if you just keep doing that, you're not in a transitional space anymore. You're in a barren wasteland that you're trying to grow things that don't want to be there. And so that causes weakness, that causes diseases. And then we have this cycle of you plant up your little raised bed and it doesn't have quite the right things. And then you spend more money. So now you have your $50 tomato.
The $50 tomato. I'm guilty of that so many times, And I think that's why a food forest is so fun, is that in your first 3-4 years, there's a lot of space in between those top story trees to put in some tomatoes, some eggplants, some pumpkins or squash or beans or peas. Because it really is, as a steward of a system, it's like being a conductor of an orchestra and creating a symphony and not just one monotone note, but going, I want diversity and I want, the polyculture. I want the birds. I want the snails. I want all of these things, but in their place and in their balance to give their gift to the ecosystem. So when you look at kind of, the plethora of things that people are struggling with, from your experience, where do you want to start? What are some of the things that people struggle with the most? And I think the way we could tackle it is just here's a species and then what works, what doesn't work. Talk about a couple methods, like good methodology. But I also think it's important for us to admit and talk about the myths, that there's a lot of like, oh, my grandma said if you use this, it's going to solve all your problems.
Well, and I think with a lot of those myths, I think they are things that did work at a time. I want to start with deer specifically. I'm so lucky, but also unfortunate. The area I live in, there are no deer anymore.
Right.
This is outside of Orlando, and all the deer have been pushed away.
Yeah.
So I hear people that everybody complains about deer, but I've never experienced it. But I think with deer, when, like your great grandma or whatever said, oh, I used to use this for my garden, that worked because there was thousands and hundreds of thousands of acres for the deer. So all you had to do is discourage them slightly, and then everything else is an easier option.
Right.
But now your garden is the only option.
Right.
And so you can't just lightly discourage them at times.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience with deer. So what are your methods for trying to discourage them, or maybe something
Well,
more?
I'd like to even just kind of appreciate the fact you and I are coming from different places in this. I am an omnivore. My family, I've grown up hunting and fishing and processing game and using every part of the animal possible. When I went home hunting over Thanksgiving, it's like we use the brain, we use the liver, we use the heart. We're tanning the hides, this next week or whatever, and we use, for us, a system of hunting called quality deer management, or QDM. So basically, we do not hunt for trophies. So we want the deer to come into a good maturity level. So we don't hunt any bucks that are smaller than an 8-point, and we don't hunt does that are younger than 3 years old, because we want to have a healthy, mature herd that has good genetics, good DNA. And for me, that's been important because I know, the acreage that our family homestead is on, I know what they're eating, I know what they're drinking, I know what their habitat looks like. I respect and honor them. Literally, after we harvested a deer, like my dad and I got a deer on the same day this year. It was awesome. It was my dad's 100th deer, which I was super proud of my dad. Like, that's his 100th one in his life. And we got doubles, that day. And we prayed over the animals and just said, thank you, God. Thank you, Jesus. I'm a Christian, for that gift of life and the gift that it gave to our land. As a sign of respect and honor. So that was my upbringing, but yours is different. So are you comfortable just sharing like a little bit of hey, here's where me and my family come from?
Yeah, so I was raised Seventh-day Adventist, and there's a lot of vegetarians in there, not exclusively, but my family very much came from a very vegetarian style. So basically just no flesh, but we're okay with animal products and stuff like that.
Okay.
But I also don't have necessarily any problem with processing and eating meat. But I agree with you that, I know my belief is very much, if you're taking a life, you should respect that animal by using it as best as possible.
Yeah.
And I don't eat the flesh, and most of the people I know are very, your better cuts of meat. They don't really like the brains, the livers too much, but those parts should be used and not just thrown away. So, I'm always trying to, if I could compost them, I would. Generally, I plant them in the garden, usually under things that will take that nutrients up, and not for me personally, but for other animals in the area, just so we can keep that cycle going.
That's good.
But I'm also a little bit on the squeamish side of, well, I'm not going to eat it, so do I really need to kill it?
Right.
Because that seems disrespectful.
Right.
This Thanksgiving we butchered some for some of the other friends and family, because we have lots of chickens and turkeys, and I was very much of, this should be cooked as best as possible. Not for us, but just, we've taken a life. Let's show it some respect by making it the best dish possible.
That's honor. That's the honor of life. And there's going to be some that are listening to this that are very strict vegan or vegetarian or pescatarian. So the point of this conversation is not to promote hunting, but for us to manage wildlife. There are ways to do it. And
sometimes, unfortunately, the most ethical way is to, unfortunately, end their lives.
Right. And that is an indigenous, practice, and that was where I learned from, both from my family, but also knowing a lot of indigenous people groups in America, and learning that honor and respect of the land, and so for deer management, I think on the myth side of that, everybody tries the expensive things that don't work. They put up the really expensive fences, and a deer can jump over a 6-foot fence. They'll just find a way to do it.
You're only keeping the babies out.
The babies out. They try hanging up the flashy tinfoil pans to like make noise and scare them away, but then they scare away the songbirds, and the deer get used to it, and they walk past them anyway.
It's all about desensitization. If you have something that is, a prey animal, they're going to be scared of it at first. But if it's there all the time, they realize that, the tinfoil ball isn't going to eat me.
It doesn't do anything.
It doesn't do anything. It's scary at first, so it'll work for a week maybe. And
even some things that are predators to them, like you can buy coyote urine or bobcat urine and like apply that around a garden. But the deer, I find, get used to it,
Well, and, if you live in an area where there's less habitat for them, the coyotes are in that habitat too, and they're sharing an ecosystem. So of course the whole area is going to smell like coyote because the packs move all the time. So
Yeah.
they're gonna avoid those areas, but if they don't have much of an area, they're just gonna stay there because realistically, the coyotes aren't gonna get them all.
Oh yeah. And when we had the school in Kansas City, we had a K through 12 private school, almost 400 students, and it was a like very permaculture based. The kindergartners would be collecting quail eggs in the aviary. The high schoolers would be looking at compost and things under the microscope, and very permaculture school, 18 and a half acres just outside of Kansas City. And we had deer. Like those deer would be 15 feet from you on the playground because they were so used to humans. And we first put in our apple trees, and our first install of apple trees, the first round was 32 or 33 trees. I can't remember exactly. And they ate those trees down to stubs, and trees aren't cheap, especially when you're trying to do it as a school, like small private school.
And fruit trees.
And we went on the journey of, all right, we're trying the bobcat urine. We're trying this. We're trying the hangy flags. Nothing worked. And then I was listening to something Jeff Lawton was talking about, because after I did my PDC, and he was like, well, Sepp Holzer does and he's like a papa, Swiss Alps, has this thing, we just call it Sepp Holzer's bone sauce. And he was like, and it works every time. And at that point, I'm so cynical. I'm like, there's no way it's going to work. I have tried everything and it is not going to work. I mean, I was so prideful, arrogant, whatever. And so I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and try this. I'm going to make it, and you have to make it out of deer bones. It's a crazy experiment. My Patreon crew has watched the classes on it and they know. But then you paint a little dollop. I'm talking like a quarter size, like bloop on the tree, and you walk away. And I'm talking 20 years later, the deer will not touch those trees. I don't know why. I've tried to figure out the science behind it. I legit cannot figure it out. So I'm like, I don't understand why it works. But Sepp Holzer was right. That bone sauce is the only thing that I have found that actually works 100% of the time. Like mind-blowing. And I found one person online that sold this little container of it, and it was like $100. I'm like, no, I think as a hunter, I'm going to make my own. I think I'm going to, just rock that, And so I think if you can't make Sepp Holzer's bone sauce, and hunting, I feel like harvesting is a really good way and a humane way to do that, because you're bringing food back into the system, the human body, or you're utilizing those parts of the body to benefit the rest of the ecosystem. Like, you're burying a duck carcass or whatever at the base of a fruit tree, and that's bone meal, that's blood meal, that's feather meal. Like, it's all of those nutrients that are going to happen naturally. And people, I've heard them argue before, like, well, bone meal and blood meal is not natural. Well, actually, it's very natural, because when you think about like
predators.
Predators. When you think about when an animal gets sick and they're going away to die and transition, they don't just die in the middle of a field. They hide under a tree or a bush and they get alone. They go into a little cave. And when that raccoon goes under that bush or the mulberry tree and it passes, guess where the remains go? It cycles naturally back into that system. Same thing with like fish, and we use fish meal. And it's like, well, the Native Americans would go fishing and they would bury the fish at the base of their plants and put it back into the system. Hawks do the same thing. They don't eat the fish in the middle of the water. They go up into a tree.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, even around here, we have a lot of ospreys and they almost exclusively eat fish. Mm-hmm. I've seen more fish on land on our property than I've actually seen fish in the lake, which is, I'm not on the lake that much. But yeah, you'll see, I mean, and this is just from either their scraps or they're hunting and then something comes in and attacks them while they're trying to bring their food back and they drop it.
Right.
So you have fish carcasses just everywhere. And then the raccoons, and possums and stuff will eat it. But then those bones are scattered all over the place. They're droppings and then just scraps.
And it recycles.
Yeah, and it recycles.
Goes back into the system. So, I mean, for me, the only thing that's worked is hunting and harvesting and managing the population that way, or Sepp Holzer's bone sauce. I've literally not found anything else that I feel like for deer really works all the time. Everything else is just kind of meh.
I don't know how well it works on deer, but for other things, it wouldn't work if you don't want to encourage them. But if you have animals that are always there, you're not going to get rid of them. Maybe just give them something that they would prefer to eat instead.
Right.
Find something native that you can plant. Usually you can find them cheaper, or you can just go out and take cuttings from the woods and propagate it yourself.
Plants, basically.
Yeah. And that works for a lot of things. I like to use it for birds, especially. Mm-hmm. If you have some berry bushes and the birds are just going after it, find some berry bushes that you can't eat. Oftentimes I feel a lot of the berries that produce the most berries are ones that are inedible to humans
Right.
because they just produce so many, and then the birds will be happy to eat them, and then
Yeah.
give them something else to eat. Now, that doesn't always work if you are encouraging them to come, because then you're just going to bring more birds and more birds and more birds. But if you're in an area where they don't have any food options other than what you're planting, give them some more food.
Totally.
And
Yep.
and then that'll help bring in bugs, pollinators. It can be
Yep.
a multiple cycle thing,
Yeah.
and that'll allow you to, reduce them
Yeah.
pestering. But there are other ways to do
And
it.
I love the songbirds. I mean, I got my bird feeding station, the little bird palace, behind us. And I think birds are one of the best defenses against caterpillars and slugs and bugs and insects. And they just do such a great job balancing the ecosystem.
They
And
want the
they
protein
bring
too.
in fertilizer. Their little droppings are fertilizing. Like there's actually really good studies about the songs of songbirds, the sound that it makes is a solfeggio frequency, and the way that it interacts with the bacteria in the soil causes the stomata of the plant to open up significantly longer, meaning there's a greater chance for fertilization, i.e., fruit. So it's like that combination of bird song with the probiotics in the soil that only happens when you have the songbirds. And so for me, with a food forest or a vegetable garden, I always have bird feeding stations. Not in the middle of my garden. I put it on the edges where I want the birds to be, that, hey, this is your space. Now, are they going to come in sometimes? Yes. But I find having the birds there has so much benefit. And I love what you're saying about bringing in the native species. And maybe you can talk about the warmer climate ones, but in the cold climate, I love using like gourmet berry, autumn olive, sea buckthorn. Those are great nitrogen fixing plants that also have berries that are good for the wildlife and really help supply for them. And, currants and gooseberries, service berries or June berries, one of my absolute favorites, the service berry. Couple of really good books about those, but what are some of the ones in the South here that you really like as far as like, I'm going to feed the songbirds. These are some good ones.
The birds really, for me, they really love the native firebush. That's a big one that you can plant kind of on the edge of the property.
Patens.
Yep, Amelia patens. Just because there's some domestic ones that don't fruit very often, so you just gotta be a little bit careful in that. There's a lot of hollies. Yapoon holly, I think, is one that comes to mind.
I really like lately the Dahoon holly and the Eagleston holly. I was introduced to the Eagleston actually at a Flowing Well tree farm in Pearson, Florida, and they specialize in like natives trees and bushes. Because I like what's the one in Groveland? Green Isle Gardens. Yeah. I like them for my wildflowers. But it's hard to find a place that specializes in Florida native trees. And Andrew and Madison at Flowing Well are so good, and their prices are fantastic at those native fruit trees, berry bushes. So they introduced me to the Eagleston holly. I already knew about Dahoon. And they actually supply a lot of the Yalpon holly to groups like the Yalpon brothers. So they, are very well known in this area. But those are really good plants to introduce to those songbirds that are not going to interfere with your fruit trees, with your berry bushes. Even a lot of native mulberries, they do make the mess with the droppings if you've got them close to your car. But if right plant, right place.
And yeah, and if you're looking for sacrificial stuff, anything with bright colors, songbirds, they generally see was infrared.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that has bright colors, that's going to be a little bit better, just to kind of draw them in. And that can be your, your far away stuff, or if you just have extra of a fruit tree that you like. Even like you said, the mulberries, if you have one that maybe you don't like the taste of, but it's really productive, put that at the edge of the property,
Right.
And then keep your more delicious stuff up closer to your house or your, well-traveled areas. And you, as just moving around as a person, are going to discourage animals a little bit by just being around.
And there's no such thing as too many mulberries. Like there's just not. There's no such thing.
No, there's not.
I want all of them. So, and I do like what you said about putting them at the edges of the property. Again, it gives them their space, and then you can have your garden, your food forest space in the middle, because those songbirds are, not only are they beautiful and they create wonder, they're going to help with slugs and bugs and caterpillars and insects and, beetles and that sort of thing. Now, if people don't have enough birds, like ducks to take care of their snail problem or their slugs and bugs problem. Let's talk about snails and slugs and bugs a little bit.
Yeah.
I love what Jeff Lawton says frequently is you don't have a snail problem, you have a duck shortage. And what was the one you said the other today or yesterday?
Oh yeah, so you don't have a rat problem, you have a snake deficiency.
Nice.
You know, if you
nice.
have tons
My mom would disagree with that.
well, so it really just depends on where you are. If you have a lot of, non-venomous snakes, more, timid snakes, then you can, encourage, you have tons of rodents and, problems. Just encourage a few areas where that, snakes can hide in, maybe some warm areas
brush
to
pile.
sunbathe. Yeah, a brush pile.
Yep.
Maybe some place for them to be able to sunbathe. That's, a little bit excluded.
I love the brush pile thing in the corners of properties because it's songbirds, it's little rats, little mice, little critters, the little snakes. Like it's great.
And there's some amazing videos on YouTube that I've seen of maybe a section that's more wooded, but you need your animals to stay in. You can like weave them into kind of like fence like structures just to kind of boost your existing fence. And there's a lot of ways to do it. And most snakes honestly are really nice. There's only a handful, at least in the US. There's some. And of course, we're in Florida, which is the capital of the most invasive snakes in the world.
Gosh, yeah.
So
they all want to kill you. Everyone wants to kill you.
But a lot of native snakes, even the venomous ones, aren't too aggressive. Our most venomous snake in Florida is the coral snake, which is, I know, one that you weren't really aware of. And yeah, it's very dangerous because it's a neurotoxin. It's our only neurotoxin snake. And I've never seen any of them strike out at people. Unfortunately, I've had to kill them because we have animals that would attack them and they'd have to defend themselves. But they just want to eat their things. They want to take their bugs, their lizards, their rats, and they would be more than happy of coexisting with you in most cases.
I was reading this article a week ago about how the most common place for coral snakes is up inside the fronds of cabbage palms. And a lot of those snakes will never come down like their entire life. They'll actually live their whole life up in the tree because it's all their food. There's water content. They're getting bugs and lizards and whatever. And so when you're trimming those cabbage palms or sable palms, you got to watch out because literally those coral snakes will be up there in the trees. I remember the first coral snake that I had ever seen was I was at a natural farm and I was doing some stuff in some of the big olive trees. And I think I was pruning back some of the 65 gallons and giving them some shape. And as I was pruning, I saw this coral snake. I was like, oh, that is so cool. Now, I grew up in Michigan. We have no poisonous snakes that will like bite you or hurt you. We walk in the woods barefoot. Like that's just not a big deal. And so I picked it up and I took a little picture with my phone and I set it down and I kept on pruning or whatever. And at lunch, I pulled it out and I showed my friend Victoria, who I call Linda. Just long story, but I showed Linda this picture and she was like, what are you doing? Red on yellow, Jack.
Kills a fellow, I think is how it goes.
Whatever the nursery rhyme is. I'm like, yeah, never heard of that. She goes, it's the most poisonous snake in Florida. You're lucky to be alive. And I was like, wow. Well, I got a picture. That's going on social media.
and yeah, for those who don't live in Florida, we have a king snake, which literally is identical in every way, except the color patterns are backwards. One's not venomous. One's, very dangerous. But attesting to if that had been any other species of poisonous snake, you would have been bitten. Yeah. And probably dead because there's only 4 hospitals in the state that carry antivenom for coral snakes.
I'm glad you're telling me this like 4 or 5 years later.
So they would have to ship it to you from, across somewhere the state. Else. Because, they're small, so they don't have much antivenom, or they don't produce enough.
Some people listening right now are squirming, like literally squirming. So let's go back to snails and slugs.
Snails and slugs. But see, snakes can help with snails and slugs. Coral snakes eat snails and slugs.
And the other thing that I found really works well are those simple beer traps, and just like a little bowl full of literally beer, a dollop, like a little squeeze of like organic soap. They just go in and they die. Things that I don't find work at all. Can we talk about diatomaceous earth? DE?
Yeah, we can go down the rabbit hole.
Oh my gosh. This is like one of my pet peeves in the gardening world, the chicken world, the livestock world. Everybody loves their DE. And the people that love it, they get so defensive about it. And honestly, I don't think they're stupid. I do. I think people that believe in the DE thing are stupid because the reality is DE, when you zoom in on a microscope, it has razor sharp edges. So diatomaceous earth, when you it comes from a crustacean, a microscopic crustacean that's been crushed up into a powder. When you zoom in, they have razor sharp edges that look almost identical to asbestos.
Which is the whole the whole like advertised behind it is that the sharp layers, cut and cause lesions on the insects and that.
And it does.
And it does. But the problem is that it's a very dry substance, which any water that you get on it, any at all,
it's inert.
It binds together because of those sharp edges locked together. The water acts like a binding agent. So then you get a paste that is just essentially bone meal, but really, 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 really mild.
Yeah. So you get like calcium. That's about the only
bit.
benefit. And then the danger is like you get these people that put DE in their chicken food or their cattle feed because they want to deworm, or get rid of parasites. And yeah, it works. But the way an animal eats is their nose is right there in their food and they breathe when they're eating. So when they breathe that in, it's causing lung damage in the long term. So yeah, you are deworming your cows, but you're also increasing their chance of bronchial infections, actually mesothelioma, like those same issues happen in animals.
And you're risking yourself because it's only functional as a dry powder and it's a very fine powder. So it's aerosolized very easily. And most people do not wear protection while doing it. You need a respirator of some kind.
It's just not worth it.
Yeah, it's I've never had it work.
For all of the issues that DE solves, I feel like there is a better solution to do that job with way less risk. If you're trying to get rid of parasites and deworming, do basic H, do the appropriate dosage of wormwood. There's just other things to be able to do.
You can get ivermectin for livestock.
Ivermectin is fantastic.
And that's safe to use on animals.
Yep. Which is derived from a bacteria. Yeah. Like it's literally the penicillin of deworming. Yep. It's just an isolated bacterium. Anyway, that's the whole rant. But so snails and slugs, ducks is going to be our best solution, and then second probably the little beer traps, basically. So what's another?
And it doesn't take a lot of ducks if you have a medium to small garden. If you have a snail problem and
they eat dozens a day,
and you have you're a little kid who loves birds, you just go to the store, get 2 ducks, so they have a friend, and they won't tear up your garden very much.
They don't.
And that's why
they're
I
not
love
like
them.
Chickens. They're not scratching and doing that.
I mean, so like the balance can be, hey, your kid wants a pet for a couple of years. You get them a pet duck.
That's
and
right.
It's like, and it can be this educational thing you're dealing with, but
I will say next to pigs, ducks are the messiest animal for me on the farm.
They are. But if that's why I said 2.
Right.
Because if you only have 1 or 2, they really don't create much of a mess. They are messy. But if they are few in a large area, they're very cleanly birds. They like to be clean.
Yeah.
It's just when you have too many of them, they make a huge mess. So
they make a mess.
Small amount if you're wanting a pet for your kid and you don't want your kid covered in poo. But,
exactly.
But they're not very good for aphids and mealybugs. And I know that you always go down the aphid and mealybug route.
Yeah.
When you talk you want to
Yeah. Aphids and mealybugs, that's a pretty big issue like here in Florida. I typically don't treat them unless I absolutely have to. Like ants and aphids and mealybugs are all kind of connected. There's pluses and minuses to them. Aphids and mealybugs are great at killing off plants that are just weak and anemic and don't want to be there anyway. So when you get aphids and mealybugs, it's usually because that plant species or that particular tree is already really weak and you probably should have acted way sooner. It's just the frosting on
Same
the
with
cake.
scale too.
Yeah.
Scale bugs.
The scale, yep. And so with a lot of those, I would say I don't treat them hardly ever. Now, if it's a really rare plant and I'm like, oh, the aphids are on it. I just got this one. I just transplanted it. I'm probably going to treat it, but I'm almost always going to do ladybugs, like bring in the ladybugs, and they will eat up those aphids and mealybugs. Now, they're not going to stick around. Like they'll do their job and they're going to leave. So you do have to create kind of a habitat like with yarrow or other wildflowers or grasses that those ladybugs love and enjoy, but they do such a good job at going after it. Very rarely will I ever bring out like neem oil or basic H or something to get rid of them.
And honestly, with the I've used neem oil to try to knock back nematodes a few times. Honestly, I feel like it just slows them down. Most of the time, it's not gotten rid of them, but usually it knocks their population back enough for something natural to come in. But
or
I feel
for the plant to get healthy again.
Yeah. The few times I've had it, they were already infected with other things, and the plant needed to go. But you do have those times where like it's not because anything's sick; it's just there's too many, and those are the times where you do need something in there. But in all honesty, the worst times I've had is because the aphids were being protected by ants. We have a lot of invasive ant species in Florida, and some
Yeah.
of them are quite dangerous as far as ants go. I mean, not to people, but to
Yeah.
other insects. And so the ants will be protecting the aphids, and so the natural predators. So sometimes you have to be like, well, do I have an aphid problem? Do I have a plant problem? Or is it
An
we have
ant
too many ant
problem?
problems?
Yep. Got a little bit of all of those. And I think a lot of people jump to the big guns to solve the problem because our mind is trying to eradicate
Yeah.
and erase. And we need to shift our mind from eradication to bringing the system back into balance.
Well, and back to what we were saying at the beginning of a sacrificial plant. Um, like Chris said, with the predatory insects for aphids, they may not stick around if there's no aphids around. So maybe plant something that the nematodes like to eat more. If your
Yep.
plant is healthy, it's not dying,
Like
and it's supposed to be
nasturtium.
there. Like nasturtiums.
Yep.
Nasturtium's a great example. You can get tons of variety packs of those, and
And they're pretty. It makes
they're
it look
pretty.
like the Shire and Hobbiton.
and so
And what's nice is you get like they'll go to your nasturtiums first, the aphids, the mealybugs, the slugs, the caterpillars. They love those nasturtiums. And so literally when I see a nasturtium getting affected, I cut the whole plant off and I feed it to the chickens and I'm like karma.
But even if you don't,
there you go.
Even if you don't cut them off, though, it gives the predators enough time to eat them.
Yeah.
Because
And run their
the
course.
predators need something to eat, and so you need to provide that for them. So maybe not eradicate nematodes, maybe have something that nematodes can eat, and then the predators can knock back the population so they
Right.
don't hurt your desired plant.
And before we get too far away from the aphids and mealybugs and ants, I think the one thing I would say for people to not do is do not use a synthetic dish soap like Dawn dish soap. Dawn dish soap, yes, will get rid of your aphids. It will get rid of your mealybugs. It will kill the ants. However, Dawn dish soap, because it's a synthetic, it strips the natural waxy coating off of the plant, and then the plant is then weaker in the long run. The plant is not going to grow back that natural coating on the leaf. So once you use Dawn dish soap, you now have a weak plant forever. Until it gets new leaves, it's going to be a weak plant forever. Things like Basic H are a natural plant surfactant, and so that's not going to strip off that waxy coating. So that's why I personally use the Basic H. So I would say the one thing I would not do on aphids, on mealybugs and ants is please don't use Dawn dish soap or some weird synthetic soap. There's other options. And on the note of ants, do you want to get into ants a little bit of what to do?
We'll touch on ants
What
a
have you
bit.
found that has worked for you with ants?
I mean, I haven't had a lot of things work.
Okay.
I've just encouraged them to go in other areas. I've tried all of like the weird, wacky things. Used a few poisons, which I wasn't crazy about. That was more negatives than benefits.
Perithrian or whatever.
Yeah. So I haven't had too much luck with it, but it was more of let me reduce certain areas, encourage certain areas.
Yeah.
So provide food for them away from my desired plants, get them moving away from it, keep them away from the aphids, let the predators attack the aphids, and just kind of that encouragement of like, I would just take a hose, and anytime there's an ant pile that's too close to a plant, it's damaging it, I just flood the whole area, let the soil settle back in, and I just keep doing that to encourage the ants to scoot over just a little bit so they're not causing problems. Because I can't get rid of the ants. There's too many of them. They outnumber me.
Yeah. And there is benefit to the ants. I mean, the ants are incredible composters. They're taking things above the soil, bringing it down into their homes and their tunnels. They're basically composting machines for us. So I think they're good. I don't want them in my annual vegetable garden. I don't want them in a flower pot, or a tree pot in the nursery area. But if they're out in the yard, I don't typically do much. Now, practically, if it's like in stepping stones, I'll probably do like boiling water because that will sterilize that colony. Done. There's no bad harm with boiling water. It's hot and takes care of it. I think cinnamon, just cheap dollar store cinnamon, does help eradicate some and move them slightly. I found like things like cucumbers and mint have never really worked for me. Like I've heard of people putting that around there. It has never really worked. I love using the trick where you take from one colony, take a scoop and put it in another colony, and they have an ant war and they kill each other off. The people that say that it doesn't work, the problem is that ants don't just live in one hole, in one little mound. One mound could have 10 other mounds around it that are actually one colony. It's one city basically of ants. That documentary I love, the Life of an Ant, talks about that, where one pile might be the nursery, colony. One might be just for eggs. One might be the adult colony. One's your adolescents and workers. And they all have these different holes. So the key, if you're creating an ant war, is to get a scoop from one side of the yard and get over to the other side of the yard and make sure it's in another colony. And that does work. But again, it's like, do we have to get rid of the ants? Because if not, why not just leave them? They're doing a great job composting and helping the system. They're cycling nutrients and they're doing their thing. I think it's a problem that we've made a problem, but it's really not that big of an issue.
Yeah, it's just a matter of like, is there too many for the area?
Yeah,
I feel.
Yep. And nematodes, I think, are the same way.
Yep.
Like in Florida and, Georgia and Texas, we talk a lot about the root knot nematodes.
Yeah, anywhere sandy.
Sandy, yeah. The root knot nematodes, and they're so bad and they're so evil. I don't know that they're so bad and evil. The kingdom of nematoda scientifically has, it's arguable, between 24 and 30,000 different subspecies. And the vast majority of them, like less than 1%, way less than 1%.
It's like less than 100 are predatory and like a root boring.
Very small number.
They're all predatory. But
like the goal of nematodes is they're improving soil quality. Yep. Like most of them are going, hey, this is really bad sandy soil. Let's send in those 100 root knot nematodes, that affect the roots, kill all the bad plants to create compost. So they're basically going, yeah, you're the weakest link. You're the weakest link. Off with your head. And then they compost it to increase the soil structure.
Because root knot nematodes will never be in fertile soil. They hate it.
Yep.
They won't do it. And they don't really attack healthy plants at all.
No.
Because the healthy ones fight back and are successful, like a parasite in a person or whatever, or a disease. They're able to fight back.
Yeah.
But the sick ones, the unhealthy ones, they're already weak. They're already struggling. And so this just comes in and makes itself home because it's a weak plant, terrible soil. Well, what do you do to improve terrible soil?
Compost.
Compost. So that's your step one in a desert environment is something needs to come through and compost the few things that are doing, unwell. Encourage the ones that are doing well, so there's less competition, and then eventually those will get big. And sometimes nematodes will go after old stuff too because they're starting to get weak. And then you have something big. So it's just another thing of just like you have animals that'll come through and graze. Yeah. These are grazers.
As you were saying that, going compost. I want an emoji for compost that I can just use all the time. So whenever somebody goes, hey, I have an aphid problem, what do I do? Compost. I have a mealybug problem. Compost. I have a nematode problem. Compost. What's the answer to most of our plant woes? Compost. Organic matter. Increase the health of your soil, and that will increase the health of your plants.
And sometimes it's like, when you're starting off your garden, if you have poor soils, like in a development or something. I have very poor soils, so it's an old citrus grove. You're not going to make a whole lot of progress if they keep compost everything, because the nematode scale of composting is over a couple hundred years, not a year or two. And so that definitely is a problem for you if you're trying to accelerate that cycle. But, try to figure out maybe some more wood chips, maybe some, obviously compost, maybe add some things that are going to improve the soil, some sort of nitrogen fixers, and maybe just identify, okay, maybe I shouldn't be using grafted fruit trees, because a lot of times the grafting stock may not be the best. If it's a cutting, mulberries especially, a lot of mulberries are done through cutting, which is great, but that cutting may have a terrible root structure for our environment. So maybe you need to find a seedling or, some variety that wants to be there and let that grow for a bit, and then maybe graft onto that or something like that, and just kind of encourage the soil to improve rather than just trying to kill the nematodes. But then you can also get, what I did was predatory nematodes.
Right. That works.
And that works great.
And you can Google beneficial nematodes on Amazon, and you can buy them in a powder in a spray bottle and just spread them.
And you just inoculate the system. That can help with other parasites like the aphids and stuff too. Certain varieties will attack them. Ants too. And that just won't get rid of them, but it will encourage them to reduce their numbers so that some of your plants can thrive.
Right.
And that gives you a chance to adapt to them.
Now that's obviously we're looking at that at a microscopic level. That is going to be a really big long-term, solution to the system. And I think we've covered a lot of the predatory things. Maybe we just hit a couple more. Like the big one right now in the southern US is hogs. Like getting rid of hogs. Do you want to talk a little bit about the hog problem? I'll say the history of hogs. There are no native hogs to the entire North American continent. None. They're all invasive.
I mean, to prove how bad hogs are, you just have to look at Texas. The fact that you can rent helicopters and shoot them from helicopters, and that's a legitimate thing that's legal because it's such a problem, I think really proves how bad it is.
Yeah. And most of them were they were introduced as a farm stock, usually like mid 1500s.
And
they were
Spanish
brought
settlers
in
brought
from
in.
Europe. Yep.
Yeah.
And they've just been set free. They've been, crossbreeding.
And
they're
then,
wild.
Well, even like newer variety, I say newer relatively, just wild ones will break into hog farms, breed with them, but then any pig can be a hog. It's just a matter of their environment. I think it takes like 2 years for a pig to turn into a hog. But you have these crazy crossbreeds with like silver razorbacks from, Russia and stuff like that. And so you get these crazy beasts that are so destructive.
And I think hogs is a great example of a species that I would say the solution is hunting.
Yep.
Like that is the solution. I don't know of any, honestly, other than trapping and euthanasia that actually works on them because they are so invasive. They are not from here and they will kill you. I mean, they are massive. These things are hundreds of pounds, each.
I've been charged by a I don't know what's the bull equivalent for hogs.
I don't even know.
I don't know what the term is for it, but
boar.
I think boar. Well, I don't know. But yeah, I've been charged by him before, and when you have a 250 pound as a kid, because I think I was like 10.
Yeah.
And I was walking around the property and there were some hogs there. Normally they run off into the swamp and, but this one was like staring me down. I'm like, oh,
bro, no, pew, 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 pew. Not going to happen. Now, as a farmer, it's not just unsafe for animals or for livestock, but they get into your plants. They dig up fruit trees. They'll rip them out, by the roots.
And if you're if you're in an area like we are with the sandy soil, tilling isn't necessarily the best thing for a lot of areas, you want to try to avoid tilling as much as possible. And hogs are great for developing a system.
Yeah,
or the pigs are, but not the hogs.
Yeah,
and
some of the other problems I think on farms, predatory birds. If you've got chickens or you got quail
Hawks,
or ducks or whatever, hawks and eagles are a problem. But again, I think those are important in our ecosystem.
Absolutely.
One, because they're federally protected. You're not going to pew-pew those under any way, shape, or form. But they take care of rats and mice and snakes and a lot of like the rabbits that are in the area. They do have a place to bring balance to the system, And so for most predatory birds, I don't try to keep them away. Most of the time, nature brings it into balance. Now, I don't want them in my chicken coop. Let's be honest. Like I want them away from my birds. So what I've started doing is attracting crows and ravens.
Yep.
And so ravens and crows are incredibly smart. I don't know if they're the smartest bird, but they're pretty close. They can remember over 200 faces. There's a reason why in the Middle Ages, the monks and the monastic orders would use the ravens and crows to deliver messages, not pigeons, because they were so smart, they'd remember faces. And so to get started, if you've got a hawk that's like buzzing your chicken coop, you can play the sounds on a little Bluetooth speaker of a crow in distress, and it will start calling in crows from the area, and the crows will chase away the eagles and the hawks, and they will take care of it. In fact, was that 3 months ago? Yeah, 3 months ago, I had a bird of prey. We have a lot of osprey and eagles in this area, a lot on the St. Johns River. And my rooster started like sounding the alarm. And so I'm a crazy man. When when I hear that freaking out sound of the rooster, I'm running, I'm clapping, I'm like, and at that time I had the broken foot. I had the boot on my foot. So I'm like hobbling across the yard like a crazy dude, trying to like clap and scare away this eagle. And all of a sudden the crows started coming in and they chased that thing away, And so the crows have become my little friends. And so I think to me, that's the best way to keep those away. Decoys can work, the little fake owl or whatever. They get used to it. You got to move them all the time. But honestly, call in the crows. Let the crows bring nature back into balance.
I'm gonna have a huge problem with eagles here probably in the next year. You're gonna hear me complain about it because for the last several years,
developers.
Well, no, not even. Well, yeah, developers. A bigger issue actually. There was a power pole that used to be for an electric well back when it was a citrus grove, and the power pole is still there, and it had cross bracing. So for 50 plus years, there's been an osprey nest there, and the same family has been there every single year. Well, the structure just gave out this last year, so they're not able to build a nest up in there anymore. They were religious in protecting their area for their chicks. That included the area that our birds were in. So I've seen multiple times bald eagles, red-shouldered hawks. They would be circling the coop, and the osprey would come out and chase them off constantly. And so now that it's not there, I'm gonna have lots of problems.
And for you in Lake County, because of all of the development, the population has lost their habitat. They went from having thousands and thousands of acres of forest and orchard and old growth, and now they have subdivisions. And so they're looking for places like yours that like, oh, look, there's free food over there.
And a lot of the subdivisions, they aren't planting trees. Some of them are, but they're not planting trees, so there's nowhere for them to nest. There's nowhere for them to eat. And yeah, so we're having this huge problem of just, populations are now being condensed into several spots. And yeah, unfortunately, there's not really anything we can do about that.
And we're getting a lot of other different wildlife, not just the birds of prey. We're getting the coyotes, we're getting foxes, you'll get bears, some of those other, top of the food chain animals that are now coming into suburban or urban areas because they have lost their habitat. And so I think for those people that do have a little bit of acreage, creating places where those animals can be happy, have their food sources, have their mulberries or their other
property line.
Along the edge of the property line is super important. Having like what you guys do of having guardian dogs. Can be super beneficial. My little Shih Tzu is not going to be guarding against anything.
Yeah, I was going to get into for the hawks and stuff. Just having your dogs out with the caveat of make sure that your dog isn't small enough to be taken away by said hawk. Like, Chris's dog is a big eagle would be able to probably pick her up.
Oh yeah.
So, if you have dogs, maybe encourage the garden to be more friendly towards them. Don't have this, landscaped area that's like, oh, the dogs are never allowed in there. They tear everything up. Well, maybe just design it or lay it out in a way that encourages them, add areas for them to lay, maybe a bed area,
little shaded
areas that maybe a damp area that allows them to lay there without digging it up. Here in Florida, it's so hot. The only way that dogs can cool off is digging into the sand where it's cold. So then, you have all this damage, but maybe just encourage them to be out there because their presence is going to deter things like hawks. It's going to deter things like raccoons, armadillos, stuff that are going to be, tearing up and more damaging than anything. It'll also protect against coyotes.
Oh, totally. And I think coyotes they're getting worse, but again, I think a lot of it is we've taken away their habitat. And so we've got to help bring it back into balance.
Did I tell you, my friend, it was 6 months ago, he was driving off the farm and he just calls me and he's like, dude, WTF are these things? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I just saw a pack of coyotes. They're double the size because they're crossbreeding with dogs.
Oh God.
So he's like, I haven't seen them personally, but he's like, I swear that they're crossbred with some large domestic because they're double the size they were originally. I'm like,
that's crazy.
Don't tell me that. We have, like just across the street, we have Howie Homestead and they have goats. And it's like, if they're double the size, now the goats are good snacks. And it's like,
that's scary.
So having those livestock guardian dogs,
it's a great way. Just those dogs. One, it's companionship. It protects the herd or your horses or your goats, but it helps create that balance. The guardian dogs like us are stewards of the land and of the farm. And I think,
and they don't have to be guardian dogs depending on your application. We have them because
they can be snuggle dogs.
Yeah, they can be snuggle dogs. We have them because we need something that isn't inherently going to go after our horses and our chickens.
Right.
We want less of the hunting desires and more of the protective desires. But if you don't have animals and you don't have any intention of getting animals, you can have any kind of dog that is just not aggressively territorial in terms of people, but willing to protect their home and just have a presence because you as the person can be a presence that'll deter most of these pests.
Oh, sure.
But you can't be in your garden 24/7. Everybody's got a life to live. And those dogs can cats, depending on the, but
Yeah,
you have to
I'm not a
worry.
cat fan.
You have to, I know you don't like cats. You have to worry about cats being invasive. So there's that kind
Yeah.
of issue, but like a barn cat or something like that, just having that presence as another animal
Yeah.
can encourage wild animals to keep a little bit of a more of a boundary approach to it.
And it just brings that balance back to the farm. I think that's what we as farm owners and stewards are supposed to do is we're not the eradication crew, like trying to get rid of all of these pests. We're here to basically bring it back into balance.
Well, and in the wild, you have, predatory animals have their territories.
Yeah.
And all this ecosystem will be wrapped around this animal claiming this area as theirs.
Yeah.
And so by having the dogs and stuff there, that can just be part of that.
Brings
This
it
is
back.
just a pack of dogs that are encouraged in this area. And so all these other animals feel safe to be there because the dog isn't their predator.
And as a farm owner, we just have to go, okay, what do I need to do, whether it's coyotes, aphids, ants, deer, to bring things back into balance? I want to be, as a permaculturist or a plant person or a farmer, I want to be an orchestra conductor.
Yep.
I don't want to be like the dictator of my farm and trying to eradicate the problems. I'm like, okay, there are some ants over there. How do we bring this back into balance, like a symphony, to really create that harmony and crescendo on the farm?
Every single animal and every single plant has a job and a role they want to fill. You don't have to do the work yourself. You
That's
can
so
allow
true.
something else to do it, and you're just going to be happier, less stressed about it, because a balanced system, in theory, you should be able to walk away from. Don't do anything
Right.
to it, and it'll be more or less the same as when you left it.
Yeah. And speaking of balance, my cup is slightly unbalanced at the moment. It's lighter than I feel like it
Dude,
should
I
be.
was giving you credit about drinking fast. I
Yeah.
finished mine a while ago.
Wow. Yeah, it's officially time. So again, thank you guys so much for listening,
Absolutely.
whether this is your first episode or your fourth or fifth episode, or you're just coming back to listen and problem solve in your garden. If you wouldn't mind taking a few moments to do the social media thing, it really does help the algorithm. Click that notification bell, leave a comment below. All of those little steps that will take you 10 seconds really does help get this information into the right hands. And honestly, it helps us as a channel. So hopefully we will see you guys soon and see you in the next one. Talk to you later.
Later.
Bye.